We are now basically 25% of the way through the fantasy season, and I'm sure you are all starting to see the direction that your team is heading in this year more and more clearly. So I wanted to share some tips for teams at each level of your standings right now, what to do if you're 4-0, 0-4, or just somewhere in the middle. So let's start at the top. Those of you out there that are 4-0 and even 3-1 teams, you guys are at the top of your standings, probably somewhere between first and fourth place, and you have your eyes set on a championship. So what do you do from here to increase your odds of winning? Well, step one, I want to actually make sure that you are a legitimate contender, which may sound weird if you're undefeated or 3-1 right now, but sometimes you get lucky and you win some games against bad teams that maybe you wouldn't have won if you played another contender. So there are two ways to check this. Both go hand in hand. The first is just plain old points for. If you are actually contending, I want to see that your points for are in the top 4 or top 5 in your league. That is a really good signal that your team is actually producing well and you aren't relying heavily on luck in your matchups. The second stat to find is all play record, which again, I want to see you in the top 4 or 5 in your league. All play is just measuring how your team would fare against every team in your league every single week. So if you're consistently among the top scorers weekly, your all play win percentage will be high, but if you're just an average scorer or lower, then your all play win percentage will be down. So if both of those signals correlate with your actual record, then you're legit. If not, maybe you're not as strong as your record suggests, and you might want to identify more as a 2-2 or lower team. It's not to say that you still can't compete, but maybe your team isn't as strong as you think compared to other teams, and you got a little bit lucky on matchups so far. But with that out of the way, if you are an actual contender, what should you be looking to do? Obviously, you have a strong roster. You've made really good start-sit decisions so far, but the urge to push harder starts to take over, and sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, that urge can cause you to make a bad decision. So step 2, don't make big moves to change your core lineup, especially in the name of this trade helps me win now so I can take the value hit. No, that is baloney, and I've made multiple videos about this over the past couple of years that I'll link somewhere up in here. But essentially, don't make short-term moves to benefit your roster at the expense of your future. For example, don't trade a first-round pick for James Conner because you lost Christian McCaffrey or Isaiah Pacheco. Don't trade away Jalen Waddle for Stephon Diggs because Tua got hurt and Miami can't find a competent quarterback. Don't make any move now that you wouldn't do in March when no one is scoring points, because the worst thing that can happen is you don't win this year and now you have an aging veteran that's going to lose value in the offseason that you can't trade away for anything close to what you paid. And that issue is even worse when you don't have any rookie picks to add youth back into your team. So your team is just completely stalled. They're dead in the water. But even if you do win the championship, after making a win now move like that, if your team was really that good, Stephon Diggs' extra 4 to 5 fantasy points per game over Jalen Waddle probably didn't really matter all that much when you're winning by 15 or more points every week. You'd have probably won anyway had you just kept Jalen Waddle. Trust me, I know this because it's happened to me multiple times. So instead, I'll call this step 3, make small moves to improve your roster using less valuable assets and draft picks. If you need a running back because you lost Isaiah Pacheco or Christian McCaffrey, don't trade your first for Kyron Williams or James Conner like I mentioned. Trade away your second or multiple seconds for Brian Robinson or David Montgomery or Najee Harris. Or you know that 23-year-old wide receiver 6 on your team that people still believe in? He's expendable. So move away someone like Jermaine Burton or Adonai Mitchell away for a cheaper running back. The same thing works for wide receivers. Buy guys like Darnell Mooney, DeAndre Hopkins, or Wan'Dale Robinson for fractions of the cost that Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, or Chris Godwin will cost you. And the second part to this, so step 3B, is just acquire handcuff running backs. We've already seen how important it can be to have handcuffs this year. We actually see it every year. Guys like Jordan Mason, Carson Steele, Kareem Hunt, Zach Charbonnet, Trey Sermon perhaps now, all handcuff running backs before the season started. And even guys like Bucky Irving and Braylon Allen have found flex appeal value that were seen as handcuffs prior to the season, and their values have just shot up dramatically. So scoop these guys up off of waivers, get them tossed into your next trade as a throw-in, because they are not valuable until they become valuable. We still have 13 more weeks of football, I promise you. Players are going to keep getting hurt, especially running backs, so start hoarding handcuffs right now. And the last step to make as contenders, and this is going to sound really weird, but hear me out, take advantage of your competition's desperation. By that, I mean, be the guy who sells Stephon Diggs to another contender for Jalen Waddle. Be the one who sells J.K. Dobbins or Isaiah Pacheco for that future first round pick. Maybe it's time to trade away Tyreek Hill to another contender and get younger. Maybe you're the team buying Michael Pittman super low for Khalil Shakir or Quentin Johnston plus, and you just bought a super talented receiver with a history of production for super cheap. Find ways to take advantage of other managers getting desperate to hold on to their dwindling championship hopes and improve your future dynasty outlook while not really changing the odds of your championship window. All right, now moving on to the middling teams, the 2-2 teams, maybe the 1-3 teams who got a little bit unlucky with a matchup, or maybe you're that 3-1 or 4-0 team that when you looked at your points for an all play, you found that you've been pretty lucky so far and you're thinking maybe that luck runs out soon. To all of these kind of teams, I now speak to you. This is honestly a really tough place to be because you can be pushed one way or another really quickly by stringing together a couple wins or just taking a couple losses. And believe me, the absolute worst place to be in Dynasty is right in the middle. So really the only step here is you need to decide which direction to lean into more over the next couple of weeks. And I say and mean lean into, because you don't really need to do anything crazy to really force yourself one way or another. So if you decide you still want to go for a title this year, lean into making small moves that can help you win matchups now over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Again, nothing crazy. We're not selling Travis Etienne for J.K. Dobbins because Etienne hasn't been producing lately. We're making small moves like you would if you're competing, just more focused on short-term points over the next couple of weeks. For example, Brian Robinson has about a month-long stretch of games starting this week against below average to really bad rush defenses. And you can go buy Brian Robinson for Blake Corum and a second-round pick. The same thing happens to Amari Cooper, who gets the Commanders defense this week, then the Eagles, Bengals, Ravens, who are all pretty bad against receivers this year. You can trade Christian Watson and maybe like a second for Amari Cooper, or another rookie like Jalen Polk, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Legette for Amari Cooper and get some extra points for cheap. And after doing that, you start stringing together 2-3 wins in a row. You're 5-2 at the end of October. Then that pushes you into contender mode and you can follow the steps that I already outlined at the start of this video. Or you can start to lean the other way and begin looking at 2025. Again, you don't need to go crazy and strip this thing down to the bones just because you're 2-2, but start looking at moves to make to get a little bit younger or shed a little bit of fat from shorter term temporary assets. Some examples of this are doing things that I already mentioned, like being the guy who sells Stephon Diggs for Jalen Waddle, or sell Mike Evans for Xavier Worthy, Alvin Kamara for Jonathan Brooks, Travis Kelce for Kyle Pitts, I guess. Or if you've rostered handcuffs that have now gained a ton of value, trade away those short-term assets before they lose that value again from the starters coming back or they themselves actually get hurt. I'm talking guys like Jordan Mason, Zach Charbonnet, Carson Steele, Kareem Hunt, whoever else pops up throughout the season. These are not long-term guys at running back, so cash out for future second-round picks. These are all moves that can buy you back years of age or future draft capital and add to your roster's long-term value. And hey, maybe the guys that you get in these deals still produce. You happen upon a 5 or 6 seed in the playoffs and a Cinderella shot at the title. You never honestly know. But I will add a final note here to teams that are beginning to lean in either direction. Give yourself a deadline. By that, I mean, don't go until like Thanksgiving still being undecided about the direction of your team. There needs to be a deadline on this because, again, the worst place to be in Dynasty is right in the middle. Give yourself just a couple of weeks, till the end of October maybe, to let your team tell you what it wants to do this year before making that decision yourself. And if I'm being honest, 99% of the time, that decision is just going to be pulling the plug on this thing for 2024 and putting up a for sale sign on your roster before the deadline. And that now leads me to the bottom of the standings, the 1-3, the 0-4 team sitting in 10th, 11th, or 12th place right now in your leagues. Some of you are probably here by design. You knew 2024 wasn't going to be your year, and this is where you wanted to be. It's just a part of the process. But then there are some of you who weren't here by design, and that is a very tough pill to swallow. Believe me, I know. And that is honestly step one here. You just got to face reality. That fat lady is singing whether you hear her or not. Sure, maybe you could go on a run. You could squeak into the playoffs as a 6 seed. Then anyone can win on any given week. But come on, let's be realistic here. The odds of that happening are slim where you're at right now. So why not maximize your odds of winning a future championship rather than mess around with trying to salvage the season and screw up more years down the road? So once you've reconciled with reality, you've maybe cried a little bit in the shower, what do we do from here? Well, your goals have shifted. Your new championship this year is the 2025 Rookie 1.01. Everything you do from here until January is with that one goal in mind. And if you're in this position and you don't have your 2025 first, you do everything you can to get it back, because then all of this is useless. You might as well just try to win games at this point if you don't have your first round pick. So I'm just going to assume that you have your first round pick or you were able to trade for it. What you need to do is just continue on this path of losing matchups this season and sell anything that doesn't offer long-term value or upside. And I mean everything. There is no reason why you should have Sam Darnold or Aaron Rodgers on your team at 0-4. Sell him. You still have Deebo Samuel on your team because you had him in 2021 for his breakout. Doesn't matter. He's almost 29 years old. Sell him to a contender. You also shouldn't have any valuable running backs on your team. Honestly, you shouldn't really have any starting running back on your team because they're all short-term assets, but sell them while they're still producing now before they get hurt and lose value. Even if you have a Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall or Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, sell those guys for high-valued wide receivers like Nico Collins, Rashee Rice now, Puka Nacua now, or if you have like a Travis Etienne or Kenneth Walker, flip them for the Brandon Ayuks, the DK Metcalfs, the Brian Thomas Jr.'s, the Jalen Waddles of the world. The priority here is just shifting your roster's assets over to longer term and more stable positions and players to insulate your value heading into the offseason. If you're in a Superflex league, prioritize fixing your quarterbacks and your wide receivers first. In one quarterback leagues, go for those wide receivers, and if you happen upon a stud quarterback, then that is great too. Tight ends are kind of the same way. If you happen upon a Trey McBride or a Dalton Kincaid or a Sam Laporta, maybe you have TJ Hawkinson a little bit cheaper now, then great. If not, it's probably best to sell away Andrews and Ferguson and Njoku or whoever else has some value that you can dangle out to contenders right now. But there is a point of where you can go too far away. You definitely still want to keep players that fit a rebuilding standpoint. If you have Justin Herbert, you probably just want to hold on to him because he's still super young. He's a very elite talent, and he still probably will be elite in 1, 2, 3 years when you're ready to win. You're just waiting on this situation to improve. Hang on to players like George Pickens, Tank Dell, Jayden Reed, Trey Benson, or Jalen Wright at running back. You don't have to have a massive yard sale and sell your couch and your dining table and your beds. You still got to build and have a home, right? I mean, we're just purging the stuff that you don't need anymore, like those old lamps, that extra desk, or whatever your wife bought on Amazon 2 years ago that's taking up space in your garage. I mean, do all wives do that, by the way, or is that just mine that does that? Don't know why. All right, so there you have it. A plan of attack at each level of competition for your Dynasty rosters over the rest of the 2024 season. If this video was helpful, I'd like it if you please hit that like button so we can spread this video to more people. And if you're not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you're looking for some players to buy right now, if you are a rebuilding team, Justin just dropped that video last week, which you guys can check out right up here.